Today, I get to interview one of my very, very, very dear friends, and I'm really looking forward to this. Betsy Sanders has been a dear friend for, I would guess, probably close to 20 years.
I think it's getting to be that
It might
long.
even be a
Yes.
little bit more than that. It's sort of surprising that that's the case. And in the interest of the zigzag for zero, Betsy has got a lot of expertise in many areas, and I'm going to attempt today to weave them together. So I know you'll look forward to meeting Betsy, hearing about her expertise in hospitality, her personal experience with healthcare, and whatever else surprises she may have in store for us. So Betsy, thank you. I am really, really glad. Betsy and her husband Sandy have also been my first hosts on this zigzag to Capitol Hill. So we're in this quaint town called Sutter Creek. You and Sandy have lived here for 30 years, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Just outside of Sacramento. And I can't tell you, it's going to be hard to leave in a couple of days. And we've been together now about 3 weeks.
Yes.
So first, let me just say thank you for letting my first destination be exquisitely appointed in every way. Not surprising though, because one of the things, and if I embarrass you at all with my accolades, you can try to rein me in. I'm not sure you'll be able
I'll just
to.
enjoy them.
Just enjoy them. So, what year was it? What years were you really leading, guiding, forming, and leading executive team at Nordstrom, and really put Nordstrom on the map with regard to hospitality? What years was that taking place for you?
Well, with a slight amendment.
Okay.
Just a slight amendment. This is an example of calling rather than planning to what you're going to be when you grow up. I unexpectedly ended up at Nordstrom in 1971 for 2 years to put my husband through an academic program. And by 1975, I had become their first woman store manager. So my learning about hospitality and what it means in the workplace really came from inspired people called Nordstrom, who, because their name was over the door, wanted the experience to be emblematic of what they believed, what they sought to live, and things that weren't considered good business practice at the time. And I was a German major. I studied in Germany for years. I had been an intelligence agent. I had no intention of going into business, and I ended up in retail. And it spoke to my heart. How we did things spoke to my heart. And so it wasn't raw ambition that had me as their first woman store manager. It was like I suddenly was on my heart's path. And it was the sense Nordstrom had gone public right before I joined the company, and their only organization chart was an upside down triangle. And if you could envision it, and I could show you a copy. I still have my mimeograph copy that I got when I applied to work there. Yeah. It is the senior people at the very bottom with hands uplifted. And they have these are the executives, have the seniors, have the middle management. But the important thing on that chart is the top of the chart. And when I did apply there, I was so unlikely to work there. None of my skills counted as, would have checked off. If I had interviewed by computer, they wouldn't have given me a moment. But what they wanted me to know was I couldn't, with my master's and so on and so forth, go into management. That because the most important people in the company, and they were on the chart, were the customers. And it was the people taking care of the customers firsthand that were the most critical people we paid. The customers paid our way, and then the people supporting them and the people supporting them. And that is the form, that is the essence of hospitality. It's creating environments where people can succeed what they came in to do, and beyond their expectations, always beyond expectations. You come in for a lipstick, you walk out with an outfit. Okay, that's not because of super salesmanship. That's because somebody listened to what you really wanted and needed. Or you come in for an outfit and walk out with a lipstick because that's all you needed. You know, it's not a matter of business building. It's a matter of customer relations. That's where I learned it. So it was a surprise to everyone when I became their first woman store manager, because there were many experienced, wonderful women in the company. I don't know what the Nordstrom saw, but what they saw was real. And it was real for me what they wanted. So from there, I got the opportunity to do what you're speaking of, which is to bring Nordstrom to California, which was our first foray out of the Northwest, Pacific Northwest. And together in Southern California, all of us rewrote the company's plans. We became a national company. We created a national footprint, so to speak. But all of this came from leadership. And what I taught, what I tried to portray, was upside down leadership, which meant wherever you were in the organization, you had the opportunity to provide the most extraordinary customer contact that you could. And if you were leading any part of the organization, how did you create part of the organization where people could succeed? So that's my, the Nordstroms are the geniuses. The best thing they say about me is that I out-Nordstrom them. That legend lives on 30 years after I've left. And I believe them. She's doing everything we wanted, because I didn't know better. So I'm throwing this out knowing we're talking about healthcare, where you have to know so much. You have to be so professional. And yet what you learn is on the job forevermore is from the engagement with those you're supporting and with those who come, the patients who are your customers, and their families and their loved ones.
Just in case that's problematic, I don't think it would be.
Yeah.
It's interesting because when Nordstrom's first came up on my radar, I happened to be the executive producer at what was then Marshall Fields. Actually, it was Dayton Hudson, and then it was Marshall Fields, and then, of course, Target. And I was executive producer for the internal television networks for both Target and for Dayton Hudson. And it was decided at that time that we would not be Nordstroms. In fact, Target, it was almost the exact opposite of that, right? So if you walk into a Nordstrom's and you ask where is such and such, they basically at that time, and I think they still do this in many stores, is they guide you there. They don't just say it's over there to the left or the right. You had a lot to do with that, I'm quite certain, and the team that you put together to help lead that effort. And that was, for me, the Target and Dayton Hudson was in the late 90s, around the turn of the century. The Nordstrom's brand that you had out-Nordstroms, the Nordstroms, was established. Yeah. And what it was very evident to me, I got a big perks by shopping at Dayton Hudson, as you could imagine. I still loved shopping at Nordstrom's more. It was just more my style. I liked that personal contact. And so I just want to say, even as an executive with all those big perks that I had, I still shopped.
Well, I still shop at Target, so
we
can't get everything at Nordstrom,
That's true. I'd like to take a little bit of a turn here. First of all, just name the book. You have authored at least one book, if not a few. Tell us what books you've authored in case somebody wants to go look at that. And I'll put the link in the blog here as well.
Well, the creaky old book that's still in print. It's just amazing. It came out in 95, is Fabled Service. And that was just a distillation of Nordstrom. And there's an important point in the choice of um, the title, which we long fought over. But the point is that, and I say this particularly again in healthcare, and we can talk about why I'm so passionate about healthcare if it's appropriate, and why I have
we'll
experience.
Go there next.
But I mean, what my experience is, which is not as a medical professional. The reason Fabled Service is important is because service isn't what we think it is. It's what our customers believe it is and say it is and talk about and tell stories about, including bad service. But despite the thought that, or the common wisdom that customers are more likely to report on bad experience than good. No, they love bragging. Customers love being seen. And again, substitute patient, substitute whatever is the form of customers. They love to be good enough people to get great service. They love to be smart enough people to recognize great service when it comes. So they talk, and they will let us know what they care about that makes a difference. In this case, in sometimes life and death.
Mm.
In your case.
In our case, with and you and Sandy were also dear friends of my late husband, Yogi Raj Charles Bates, and in fact, we've sat at this very table before he died in 2012, enjoying your hospitality. And I do want to turn that frame of reference toward healthcare, because the reason that I'm traveling, as you well know, from Southern California, now I'm in Central California, and I'll be heading east toward Capitol Hill, is because I want legislators to hear the stories and experiences of everyday people like yourself and your husband, and the dozens of people that I'll be interviewing over the next several months, what your experience is specifically related to the experience of safety in healthcare. And I have a frame of reference, and there's some data to support this, and I'm very interested in your perspective on this. First of all, what would you like to say about your experience in healthcare right now? I don't want to say more than you want to be said, so let me hear in your words, and let our viewers hear in your words where your experience with healthcare is right now, please.
Well, first of all, I've had the great honor and joy of being on the board of directors and the first non-healthcare professional to be chosen for that board of a very special not-for-profit healthcare system, hospital system. And that was 7 years on a 5-year term of really understanding more about the nuts and bolts about running a hospital and what and running a big system and running a system in disparate kinds of communities and so on. And this was a values-based, mission-based hospital company. So I really got to see how having the initial focus and the constraints of a mission really affect the delivery of healthcare, and how difficult it is. I mean, so much difficulty. And healthcare was changing a great deal in that time, healthcare delivery. This was in the 90s, 90 to 97. So I went from that to the board of WellPoint, to the board of health insurance. And sure, and for-profit, had just gone for-profit, taken Blue Cross for-profit. And I really got to see, I have certain prejudices. No, they're not even prejudice. That means judging before knowing. I had so many thoughts about how difficult it is to serve in healthcare when there's so many constraints, market constraints on the pay or on. I went from the system to those who are paying for the health care, and it's a very, very difficult thing, but it kept me engaged at a very different level than most people in the whole question of healthcare. So that's my umbrella. That's my 500,000, no, 50,000. We'll come down a little, not higher than the highest airplane, but it also comes right down to the ground quite often. And it engaged me throughout many, many years, throughout over 20 years. It's engaged me in the individuals, from the masses to the individual, because every group is made up of people and people's stories and experiences. We have been very particular because of my experience, and I will tell you, our in our youth, in our young 20s, when we were just starting out as adults, we didn't know much, and we didn't understand much. And I, for instance, was over anesthetized at giving birth to our first child, and it actually took me out. Took everything out of my body. I had an out-of-body experience, perhaps not a near-death experience, but I stopped breathing, my heart stopped, everything stopped. And I was 23 years old and very healthy. And so that experience alone, if you think I learned from it, I didn't even understand what had happened, because 19 months later, same anesthesiologist, this was not in the US, but the same anesthesiologist also was there, and the doctor didn't get there, and instead of delivering our baby, again, this is Italy, details are crazy, but instead of delivering the baby, anesthetized me to the point that the baby was born long after ingesting amniotic fluid, etc. So, and that's only because of an intervention that took place. So obviously, terrible things can happen with the wrong processes in place. Mm-hmm. It took me years to understand that, and to understand how my level of connection isn't available to everyone. So I'm very aware of being, I'm as informed as I can be, and I look for medical professionals who welcome this is where hospitality comes in again, welcomes the interchange, welcomes me knowing something about my own body, even if it's not, I don't have medical knowledge, but I have the knowledge of my own body. I'm my husband's, I'm my husband's caregiver at this time in our life. I pay a lot of attention. I'm his advocate. I recognize how important it is. Looking back on that first experience where we never should have accepted that anesthesiologist twice, mm-hmm. Just realizing that this happened. So my experience is one of an attempt to be as informed as I can be, to be not an equal partner when it comes to big decisions, but to be able to weigh decisions, etc. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think it actually gets to the heart of perhaps not a misperception. I'm not finding the exact right word for it, but maybe we'll arrive at it together. One of the things that seems to have happened in healthcare over the last several years is an increase in attention of what I would call conveniences, especially in the hospital setting. So, for example, there has been a lot of attention paid, and I have been an advocate for people in the hospital within the last few years. This was not necessarily the case or the experience that I had with Yogi Raj in 2012, but over the last few years, there's a lot of attention to, for example, really giving food when food is wanted, rather than it being delivered at a certain time from one cart. It's much more meeting that patient where that patient is at that particular time. That would be one example that I think some hospitals have moved in that direction, that there's a lot of attention paid to the environment, painting the walls in colors that are more in line with the psychological sense of ease for most people, even though that may not be a universal truth. Those touches move in the direction of creating a hospitable environment in the hospital or care center. What I do wonder, and I believe that people are beginning to expect this, one of the ways in which hospitals get rated, as you well know, probably both from the insurance side as well as the hospital side as a board member, they get rated on customer reviews. And customers, whether they're giving a review as a patient or as a shopper in a store, they're often looking for, how was I treated? Did I get the kind of attention that I wanted to be given? Was it a pleasing experience, especially given the circumstances of an illness, which is obviously how somebody would come into a hospital or healthcare center? My sense is that, Betsy, that gets confused and prioritized even above some of the basics of prioritizing safety, for example, creating the right risk assessments, attending to the right pharmaceutical interventions or prophylactic care, getting the right team lined up in a collaborative way on behalf of that particular patient's needs, which stem from the patient's outcomes and expectations for an outcome, really wanting to get to know that patient. And I would love for you, of all people I know, to try to point healthcare administrators, especially, because I know most caregivers and patients want to have a really good, solid relationship, even if it's just temporary, where they're connected, where the need of the patient is connected with what is delivered to that patient. And the skill of that care practitioner, be it a physician, a nurse, the person who comes in and sanitizes the room, the administrator who's setting those policies in place, actually attends to the need of each patient individually. What gets missed when we over prioritize hospitality, and especially if we over prioritize hospitality over safety? Can you speak to that directly? What's at the heart of hospitality that matches and meets safety? I think that's the question I'm looking for.
Wait, I've only had 3 hours of psychology, and it was my freshman year, Psych 101. The biggest takeaway was Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's affected the rest of my life. It's become a building block for everything that I've done. So without safety, none of our other needs can be met. Safety is the grounds for all of our needs. So, that's the first thing I would say. Safety is, the terrific organizations, in terms of being perceived as such by their customers, have an area in which they excel. And that we can break it down to 3 areas. They're either operational geniuses. I would have put Target for many years that I've studied them in them. They deliver on really special products, or they provide intimate service. And you have to excel in one area, but you have to meet and even be terrific at the other 2 as well to truly stand out. So let's just use that model for a minute. Hospitals as a whole, and all caregiving, all medical caregiving establishments must excel operationally. They must. I don't care how beautiful my room is, how good the food is, how kind the people are. If I walk out sicker than I came in, or I'm not healed when I could have been, or in fact I pass away because of it, I die. That's the ambiance loses credibility. So the basic line, and this is what I think, and I don't know if it's okay to name. I knew the JCO study intimately. There There are other measures. Every time I go to the ER, and here at the ER is our walk-in clinic. We live in the rural area, but anytime I have any kind of intervention, from that to a surgery, I receive a questionnaire, or I can go online and answer a questionnaire. And I find this very important, but the operations have to be as close to 100% as we can humanly make them. That is where all of the great, well-reputed institutions stand. So let's look at the other two areas. The product is very often dependent upon the skill set of those who are associated. I have for years, before hospitalers, is that what we're calling one of the specialties? Hospitalers. Hospitalists, yes. And even there, this is true. I look for hospitals with good hospitalists, or I choose physicians who practice at hospitals I truly trust. Mm-hmm. So it's the skill, the level of the hospital's reputation, deserved reputation, that is very much a part of has been always of my healthcare decisions. And I make tons of recommendations to people. I mean, people ask, if they so I have an influence on. I'm an influencer also on those decisions. Mm-hmm. So in any case, that's the basis, and then the how things are done, not done there, not the operations, but what actually is considered part of the whole experience becomes the product. And that's where, there is a hospital that is part of the system that's in our county, that we have chosen all of our specialists who go at that hospital, because it is, as I say, part of our system. We're in any case, we're a level 1 hospital, if that's the correct term. So for everything else, we would end up in a hospital 40 miles away. But it is the most extraordinarily pleasant experience, and it's so conducive to healing. It's beautiful, and it's beautiful not because it's a luxury hospital where only the wealthy can afford to go. It's beautiful within the terms of insurance companies, etc. It's beautiful, and it's soothing. It is soothing to be there. So here comes that product, so to speak. The product is delivered in place. The food is good. The food's actually good. Then the service part of it is the ability of the people to interact in a way that's pleasant and dignified and respectful. But it's other things as well. For instance, hospitals have to have rules. But I will never forget, and this happened 40 years ago. My husband had knee surgery, which at the time required a week's hospital stay. Mm-hmm. And it was our son's 9th birthday. And I asked if it were possible for Sandy, my husband, to be wheeled out into this little lobby that was off the elevator just for that floor, to have his birthday cake, to have Chris have his birthday cake with his dad. And they looked at me oddly and they said, "Well, do you want to bring it in the room?" I go, but they're only 9 and 7. I can't come in the room. And they said, well, they can. That the rules are there so that we don't have disruption from children under 12 who are not disciplined, who are, running around disturbing people. And Sandy was in a semi-private room. We'll ask his roommate, but as long as he can have a piece of cake, he's doing very well too. I'm sure he'd enjoy it. So it was so stunning to me, because up to then the rule was no children, no children, no children. Even if you were the only person, for instance, in a Navy hospital my mother-in-law was in, on the ward, no kids. So that kind of thing where, you mentioned it with the food, so interacting. Now we come to hospitality. How do we make this an interaction that works for both of us? How do we make this an encounter? How do we make it a stay? Not that we expect dinner to be served at 3 a.m. That's not the point. But the point is that within the parameters of honoring our staff as well, honoring the systems in the hospital, how do we make the system serve? Because you have to build all of this in systemically. So operations and product and service for this intimate, for this customer positive experience, this patient positive experience depend on the system. And that is, so hospitality actually has to be systematized. It's so much more than a warm smile and a nice greeting and remembering to say goodnight.
Thank you. That systemization, creates the continuity that I know I recognized early on with Nordstroms and have seen many other organizations adopt that model. And I know that you've been significantly influential around even other countries. When we first met, I know you were working quite a lot in Japan, if I remember correctly. Thank you so much for taking the time for this interview. I do want to make an acknowledgement that we're far apart on the video here because it is COVID, and even though we have been in separate quarters, this is the first time I've been in your living room for 3 weeks. I'm living in an apartment on the other side, but
Speaking of hospitality,
well, you've been very hospitable. You've had great hospitality even at a distance, and I've really, really enjoyed this time together. And like I said, I am going to miss being here with you. Thank you. Thank you. And hopefully it won't be the last time that I'm invited back to come into your hospitality here. Thank you again for your time, and for those of you watching, thank you for listening.
Thank you.